Greetings, Pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage. Today we've got part 3 in our mini MaxScript series, and joining me once again is fellow character artist Matt Filiault.
Hello, again.
Hello again. There he is. Okay, so this is part 3, so I've gone ahead and added some extra things to our script, and I'm going to review what we've added here. And we have one additional function that we're going to code up together today. So we go ahead and launch the script here, and you'll see here's our tools dialog again, and we have our remove turbo smooth button, and we have another one that says remove all modifiers. So what I've done here is, if you look at the code, this was our original code here. So when we press the button, it goes through every object in the selection, it checks the modifiers. If the modifier is equal to turbo smooth, it deletes it. However, for some added functionality, we now have a second button that I've created which removes all modifiers. And when I say all, what it does is it removes the top modifier in the stack. So you can have multiple modifiers and it will remove each one layer at a time. I'm working to find out how to get a count of the total number of modifiers and just keep removing until it's all the way done. Then this button will effectively do what it says. But for the moment, if you just kind of spam it, it works. Now, a third button that we wanted to add was, Matt was explaining to me that not only would he like to remove turbo smooth from all objects, but what would be very helpful is if you could add turbo smooth to all objects. Isn't that right?
Yep.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about how to add turbo smooth, and this little thing here, we're going to tell it how many iterations we want each time as well. So let's go ahead and learn that together. So down here, I'm going to start, we have our button is already created, button add turbo smooth, and if you hover over it, it says add to turbo smooth to all selected objects. Turbo smooth iteration is determined by the spin control, which is right here. So I have added some code here for that button, which you see here, and for the spinner, which you see here. Now the spinners are interesting. You can tell it a min and max range and by how much it should increment each time. So for this turbo smooth, to prevent people from exploding their computers, it goes from iterations 0 to 5. So the maximum you can apply is 5. Now please note, this will apply turbo smooth to all objects in the selection. So if you have 100 objects at 100 faces each and you add 5 iterations, you may experience some slowness. But we're going to only increment from 0 to 5 by an increment of 1, because that's what makes sense for turbo smooth. So we tell it increment by 1, and our type is integer. So an integer number, 1, 2, 3. You can't do 0.5. Then we just give it a position on the dialog and a width. So all of that gives us this little spin box here, and you can go all the way up to 5. I can't go higher than 5, and I can go all the way down to 0. The default value, however, is 1. What we're going to do here is we also have the button next to it, add turbo smooth. So we're going to wire up, is what they say in coding. We're going to wire up the functionality to that. So down here, before the end of our create dialog, we have our our on button add turbo smooth button pressed do. So when we press that button, what do we want to do? Well, first what we need to do is we need to treat every object individually, even though it's part of the selection. So what we're going to do is we're going to get all the objects and put them into what's called an array. An array is just a list of objects, okay? So we're going to call this array cell, which is shorthand for selection. We're going to say this is equal to the selection as an array. So this just makes a list of all the objects, and we're going to call that list SEL or cell. Okay, so now what we're going to do is say for, and this is a counting operation, I equals 1 to cell.count 2. Now, that may seem a little crazy. Does that seem crazy to you, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, so here, I'll explain.
A little bit over in my head.
Okay, that's fine. That's what we're here for. So what this is doing is this is saying for I equals 1 to cell.count. So cell, as we explained, is our list of all the objects. So we're going to say count cell. How many are there in cell? So at the moment there's only going to be 3. So imagine this is 3. So I'm going to remove this to put 3. So imagine this is 3. Is essentially what it's going to be. So it's saying for I is just some random variable we come up with to kind of
Okay.
temporarily count. Think of I as like scratch paper.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. If I
Right.
it's just
Exactly.
arbitrary.
So what I is going to do is it's going to increment from 1 to 3. And each time it's going to do what we're about to tell it to do. So what it's going to do is it's going to select of cell I. So what that's just saying is we're going to count through the objects. We have 3 objects. So I equals 1. What are we going to do? We're going to select 1. And we're going to do some stuff to it. Then when I increments to 2, it's going to say 2, what do I want to do? Select the second object, then select the third object. So this is a simple way to iterate through an entire list. You could have a million, and it would just do one at a time. 1, 2, 3, and it would select the first object, the second object, the third object, go right down the line. So all of this is code that I've taken directly from using the MaxScript listener, as we explained in an earlier lesson. So I'm just going to type this in here, and I will explain it as we go. Turbo smooth UI is equal set it on. Okay, so what this does is, now that we've selected the first object, the second object, the third object, one at a time, we're going to go to our modifier panel, which is up here. As we're used to clicking and dragging and pulling down something, I'm going to add a modifier to the selected object of turbo smooth. So that's what that does. Now the UI on is part of just the code that Max knows internally. So don't worry about it, just type it exactly as it shows here, and it will work. Now we want to go one bit further, and we're going to say on the selection, which is I, each time it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, we want to go to our modifiers. Specifically, we want to go to our turbo smooth, and we want to set our iterations. Now, we want to set it equal to spinner, spinner's value specifically. So I know that's a little crazy as well, but what this says is, again, go to our selected object, go to its modifiers, go to its turbo smooth modifier, go to its iterations, and set the number of iterations equal to the value of our spinner, which is this here. So now that should all work. So let's go ahead and close this, and I'm going to run the code. So now, here's our dialog. I'm going to select every object, and I'm going to say I want to add a turbo smooth with an iteration of 1. I'll click the button. Now I can go to each object. Let me move this out of the way a little bit. Each object, and you can see turbo smooth, and it has an iteration of 1. So now I'm going to select all objects, and I'm going to say remove turbo smooth. So now the turbo smooth is gone. And notice our cone here still has the bend that it needs. Now one step further, I'm going to select them all again, and I'm going to change the iteration to 2. And I'm going to click Add Turbo Smooth. And you'll notice as I click an object, it has Turbo Smooth, and indeed the iterations are 2. And it doesn't matter how many iterations it has, I can still select everything and click the Remove Turbo Smooth button, and now it's removed it regardless of its iteration number. So how is that for you, Matt? Is that making sense? Is there anything you want me to go over in more detail?
No, that makes sense. The only question is, okay, it will say the object already has a turbo smooth modifier applied to it. This is simply going to stack another one on top of it?
Correct. Yes, it will.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and try that out so we can show people. So I'm going to select all, and I'm going to add a turbo smooth of 1. There we go. Now, it takes the entire selection. So if you wanted to, you could just select 2 objects and click Add Turbo Smooth. And now when I look at it, indeed, there's a second Turbo Smooth on top of the first one. It doesn't then just iterate it up to 2. Now that would be an interesting challenge, is to say, check first if it already has a Turbo Smooth. If it does, go into the Turbo Smooth and increment the iteration. That might be an interesting challenge for our viewers or for you to try on your own and see if you can make that work. But for the moment, what it does is it just adds on top of it. Now, the interesting thing also is if we select all, and I'm going to say remove turbo smooth, you'll notice that these 2 objects still have a turbo smooth because they had an additional one on top of it. As I explained earlier, right now it just takes from the top of the stack the first time it runs into a turbo smooth, and I'm working towards discovering how to get a count of the total number of modifiers, and then we can iterate through them as we did here. For I equals 1, 2, I could say for I equals 1, 2, the total number of modifiers, continue to remove as long as there's another one there.
Right.
But for the moment, I don't know how to do that yet, so I'm just going to keep hitting the button, and there we go. So in essence, I could take this object and I could add, I could add a turbo smooth to the object. Oh, now it's completing.
Well, with this functionality, I can do what I wanted to do. If there's already turbo smooth modifiers added to some of the objects, I just remove them, and then if I want to apply to all of them evenly at the same iteration, I can just add the turbo smooth.
Correct. Now what I've done here is I've added 3 to these objects. So if I click remove turbo smooth 3 times, now it's all back down to normal. So that's what our functionality does. Now all of this is super handy, but you mentioned earlier, Matt, you wanted this as a button up on the toolbar, correct?
Yeah, what I was wondering is, instead of having it in like a little rollout, how could you have the buttons that are in the rollout directly on the toolbar, like as a little square button, like the text tools one?
Right,
so that
like this one here.
So I mean, when you click the text tools, it brings up a rollout, but what if, like kind of like a button on the command panel where you would just press it one time and then it would just do the function,
okay,
rather than opening up the rollout?
Right. Well, there is a way to do that. Now, the only one that we can't do in that same manner naturally is the one that has the spinner.
Right.
The
That
spinner
makes sense.
come with it. But say we want to remove turbo smooth, we could easily do that. So if we go ahead and select all of this, so what we want to do is go to the remove turbo smooth button press do, and we want to take just the guts of it. We don't want the on button press because the button is not going to be there. It's going to be a button of itself. So we're going to select this, and we're going to click and drag, and I'm going to point just to the right of my text tools. And when I do that, here I have a new script button icon appear. Now if I select all my objects, I'm going to add a turbo smooth to them. Now if I select them all again, and I'm going to click this button now, it removes all the turbo smooths. So we don't even need this anymore. We can close that, and if I select everything, and again, add turbo smooth, and now you see there's no MaxScript open. This is just the listener here, so there's no MaxScript open. I'm going to select everything, and I'm just going to click this button, and all the turbo smooths go away.
Cool.
There's one further tip I want to share with you guys is, you see how the text tools has a really nice icon and a hover text, and mine doesn't. You don't know what this is. It's just a general script icon. If we right-click it, excuse me, you can say customize. Customize, you can tell it where you want it to be on the user interface. Pardon me. And if you right-click and say edit button appearance, now here we can give it a tooltip. We can say remove turbo smooth. We can give it an image, which there's all kinds of images to choose from here. You can do the MS icon, so it's MaxScript. There's all kinds of ones here, and I believe there's a way, I have to look into it a little bit more for you guys, I believe there's a way to actually add your own. So I say OK, now it's a MaxScript icon, and if I hover over it, it says remove turbo smooth. So now we've taken all that code functionality, or at least a subset of it in this case, and we've put it directly onto a button onto the toolbar here. Now one further thing you can do is if I take my code back and if I say MaxScript, script changed, no, paste. So here's our rollout again. If you wanted the rollout to come up as a button like this, you would select just all the code here, and then again drag it next to it, and there it is. And now I can close that, and now this launches the rollout each time.
Cool.
So that way you don't have to, you can have just a quick one, or you can have the full tool suite. So how's that for you? Does that get your feet wet with MaxScript, and you feel like you could do some of this now?
Yeah, and it gives me the functionality I was looking for. Just the practical use of deleting all the turbo smooths, or all modifiers for that matter, and adding them.
That's true.
That was my original.
If we click the remove all modifiers, by the way, it does get rid of our bend here. So
right.
it actually starts at the top of the stack and works its way down.
Yeah, I mean that is useful though, because sometimes I have the unwrap UV, W modifiers, and the push modifiers when I'm making the cages. So that's really useful. Like if I ever need to go back to the original model that without modifiers.
Absolutely. So for you, Matt, and for all of our other fellow pilgrims, what I will do is I will add a link in the description to either the code itself or to the ability to download the MaxScript itself. You guys feel free to, hack at it, change it, experiment with it. And don't be afraid to send me, any questions you have about MaxScript. If you have a script that you're really proud of and you want to share, I'd love to see that too. And, we're all about every artist getting better each and every day. And so I'm happy to have helped you, Matt. This is a great way that something I know that Matt didn't know, now he does. So I have to find another way to help him. But yeah, every artist just helping each other grow. That's what it's all about, guys. And if you are a fellow artist and you want to join the pilgrimage, feel free to drop me a message. I'd be happy to have guests on the show. Again, I want to thank Matt for joining us today. And as always, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.